Excellent. Well, thank you everybody for coming along to this afternoon's webinar. My name is Sophie O'Keefe and I'm the General Manager of Operations at English Australia, and I head up all of our professional development programs. So I'll be facilitating the first part of this workshop, but we also have here with us today Professor Anne Burns, who will be helping us to facilitate the webinar, and then Liz Stoyanova, who took part in this program last year, who will also be talking later on in the session. So welcome everybody, and thanks Anne and Liz. So in today's webinar, we'll really be giving a lot of useful information for people who are considering putting in an expression of interest for the 2025 Action Research in ELICOS program. So I'll start off and I'll talk a little bit about the program structure, the commitments for participants in the program, and also about eligibility for the program. And then I'll also cover the 2025 research theme. Then I'm going to hand over to Anne Burns, who's going to talk about what is action research, and also she'll give you some tips for writing expressions of interest to join the program. And then finally, we'll hand over to Liz, who took part in this year's Action Research and ELICOS program. And Liz is going to give you a testimonial about what it was like to participate in the program. And at the end, we'll take questions via the chat. So if you do have any questions along the way, feel free to pop them into the chat, but we'll be answering the questions at the end. Okay, so the Action Research in ELICOS program is run in partnership by English Australia and by Cambridge. It started in 2010, and English Australia and Cambridge have run the program every year since then, even during COVID, which makes this the 15th or 16th year of the program. And around 150 teachers have participated in the program across those years. We've been fortunate enough to have Professor Anne Burns as the academic lead of the program since the inception of the program. And Anne is the Professor of TESOL at the School of Education at the University of New South Wales, and she's a Professor in Language Education at the School of Languages and Social Sciences in Aston University, Birmingham, UK. More importantly, Anne's a recognised expert in action research around the world, and she's got considerable experience in planning and implementing action research programs around the world. So our program is run in partnership by English Australia, Cambridge, and Anne Burns, who really leads the academic side of the program and brings in the expertise in action research. So people who take part in our program always say that it is a considerable commitment and amount of work, but that it's definitely very worth it. So for those of you that are interested in joining the 2025 program, the expressions of interest are due on the 23rd of January, and there's instructions about what you need to do to express interest in the program on our website. So I'll pop the link to the web page in the chat in a little bit. Then we usually get around 20 expressions of interest to take part in the program, and we have to choose 6. So there is a selection process that happens, and we notify the successful researchers in the beginning of February. And then after that, the program takes place over 11 months. And during those 11 months, there are 3 workshops that participants take part in. 2 of those workshops are in person, usually in Sydney, and 1 is virtual. All attendance at the in-person workshops is funded by Cambridge, and so we reach out to the participants and we organise flights and accommodation to attend those workshops. And again, you'll be able to see the dates for the workshops on our website. Between the workshops, there's lots of interaction that happens amongst the participants and also with myself and with Professor Anne Burns. And then really the program culminates with researchers presenting their projects at the English Australia Conference every year. And in 2025, the English Australia Conference is happening in Brisbane in September. Throughout the 11 months, researchers must submit 3 different reports, and there's lots of support with the report writing that comes in the workshops and from Anne Burns and from myself. The final report that's submitted is then worked on for publication in the Cambridge Research Notes Journal. So every year we're fortunate that all of the projects in our program are written up by the researchers and are published in Cambridge Research Notes Journal. So if you go to our website, you can see all of the editions of the research notes that are devoted to the Action Research Program. They're listed there, and it's an open access online journal. So if you click on the different editions, you'll be able to read reports from all of our Action Research and ELICOS programs that have taken place in the past. In terms of eligibility for the program, people who apply must be employed to in an institution that's registered on CRICOS to teach ELICOS. But you can be teaching on any ELICOS program. So it could be General English or an EAP program or exam preparation program, any type of program. To be able to apply, you must be approved by your institution to take part in the program. And that's because the institution also has considerable commitments in regards to the program in terms of releasing teachers from teaching across the days of the workshops and for the conference as well. And also there is a financial commitment at the English Australia Conference, whereby Cambridge funds the registrations of researchers to attend the conference, but institutions must fund the flights and accommodation for researchers to attend the conference. So researchers need to be employed for the majority of the period of the program by their institution. And this is because you actually need a class to be able to collect data with. So it's okay to be a casual employee of your institution. And we've had questions in the past where people weren't sure if they were going to have work for a long enough period to cover what we thought was enough to be able to participate in the program. And what we've said to people in the past is that really you need to have at least 15 weeks of employment with a class full-time throughout the program to be able to collect enough data and to be able to do the work with your class for your research. We say that it's a maximum of 2 teachers per project, so we won't accept applications of 3 teachers working on one project. And we also really recommend that projects are undertaken in pairs. In the past, we've had teachers working in pairs and individually, and those groups that are working in pairs always say how helpful it is to have someone to bounce ideas off and someone who can really keep you going throughout the period of the program. So we will accept applications from individual teachers or 2 teachers with a preference really for working in pairs if you can. And people who apply must be able to participate in all of the workshops. So please do head to our website and check the exact dates of those workshops and also of the conference, and make sure that you're able to participate in those workshops. And finally, for the eligibility, we say that your projects can't contribute to ongoing postgraduate study. So if you're doing a PhD or a master's degree at the moment, we don't accept projects that are contributing towards those degrees. And that's really because a lot of work is done with the other researchers and with Anne Burns on the projects. So there is a considerable commitment in taking part in the program. But like I said, everybody who participates really feels that it's absolutely worth it. And on your screen now, you can see some quotes from previous participants in our program. Some of the themes in the feedback that we get from participants is that the program is incredible professional development, and it's also a great way to increase or to enhance your network across Australia. People say that they learn a lot about themselves as teachers, but also that they start noticing a lot more about their students and a lot more about what goes on in the classroom. And the final quote is from somebody who was telling us that they felt a little apprehensive about the program when they started, but by the end, they said that you don't need to be fearful about doing action research because all of the support that you need vis-a-vis action research itself is provided in the program. So the research theme for this year is promoting formative feedback and assessment using generative AI to enhance personalised feedback on language and develop essential life competencies. Each year we have a theme, and we ask that people who are applying for the program align their application to that particular year's research theme. So if you are going to submit an expression of interest, it will need to be aligned to this theme. There are a couple of terms in the theme that I just wanted to unpack. So firstly, there's the formative feedback term, and what we mean by that is developmental feedback that's provided during a student's learning program or during the course to help identify areas for improvement. And secondly, there's the term life competencies. And by this, we mean 21st century skills such as critical thinking, problem solving, digital literacy, social responsibility, communication, emotional development. And there are other examples of what we mean by 21st century skills in the Cambridge Life Competencies Framework. So again, if you head to our website, we have a link to that framework, and I definitely recommend having a look at it to unpack that term life competencies. So the theme this year is focused on using Gen AI and the ways that it can be leveraged in the classroom to provide personalized feedback to support students' improvement in both language proficiency and life competencies. So with your expression of interest, you may choose to focus on one or the other or both of those parts of the theme. I'm going to hand over to Anne now, and Anne is going to continue, and she's going to cover, first of all, what we mean by action research and what is action research. So over to you now, Anne.
Oh, thank you very much, Sophie, for the introduction, and welcome to everybody who's joined us today. It's really a pleasure to be able to work with you and explain a little bit more what this program's about. So one of the puzzling things when people first think about this program is what this funny term action research means, because it brings together two areas of activity which are usually seen as separate. So you've got the action and the research. And I'm taking these ideas from a book I did in 2010. Actually, you get a copy of the book, which is a step-by-step introduction to action research when you join the program. So there are some elements that are really different. You may have, for example, been enrolled in research methods courses if you've done study in the past. And these often take you through different kinds of approaches to research, but they don't always include the concept of action research. So it can be a little bit puzzling when you first start. So what we're talking about here is something which is very self-reflective on the part of the person who's doing the research. So it's systematic in the way that you approach the exploration. So it has the elements of a research process because it's systematic, collecting evidence and using certain way of looking at your classroom. But the important thing here and the important difference with a lot of research which is done in academic context is that when you do action research, you're not only the researcher, but you're also the daily person who's participating in that context. So you're carrying out your normal kind of activities, and at the same time, you're bringing research into the equation. So it's a sort of process where you're wearing two hats, really, the researcher and the person who is the agent in that particular context, with your students, of course, who are also active in that context. And what we're interested in is aiming to identify some kind of problematic situation or issue. But by problematic, I don't mean just looking for problems or things that are negative. What I mean is things that are intriguing you or puzzling you, or that you think you don't fully understand, or that you'd really like to explore in much more depth so that you can introduce into the classroom activities which may be an improvement for yourself in the way that you teach, but also for your students to help them get to the goals that they want to achieve. So we could say that what we're trying to do here is to bring about a critically informed way of changing things, because we're collecting some evidence about how these things are operating in the classroom and what we could do to change them. But we're also being rather critical in the sense of having a critical perspective on analyzing what we're doing in order to learn much more and to deepen our own professionalism about the way that these things operate. And also, we can say that it's a very democratic way of doing research because we're bringing into the equation the people who are actually active in the classroom rather than having an external perspective from people who are not usually associated with that classroom context, but maybe doing research as outsiders. So it's rather different from the traditional way of looking at, experimental research and also qualitative research. I will move on to talk a little bit more about all of this. What we've adopted in this program is a model from Kemmis and McTaggart, which is quite old now, but it's actually a helpful way of thinking about the steps in the research. So one of the first things we would do, based on what I was saying previously, is we would probably develop some kind of plan, or maybe already have some kind of plan in mind of some action that you could take to improve or understand or explore what's already going on. So this is a bit of a reflective process where you may have already thought about something that you want to take further and look at in a lot more depth in the way that you're teaching or your students are learning. Then the next stage is to put that plan together and to put it into practice in the classroom. And I'm sure when Liz talks later, she'll tell you a little bit more about that. So you put it into practice in a practical way. But at the same time, we want to find out some evidence for what's going on, and whether things are improving, whether they're not improving, perhaps, and we need to take a different direction. So we need to collect some data, as it's called, of course, in research, in order to provide this kind of evidence. And we discuss at some length in the workshop what that evidence, the way that you could collect that evidence and what you might be looking for. It could be surveys, it could be observations, it could be discussions with students, it could be a focus group, for example, where you're finding out a lot more about what's happening as a result of this plan that you're enacting in the classroom. And then finally, in this model, there's the term reflect. Actually, I think reflection goes across all of these steps, because you can't even begin to do this process without immediately starting to reflect on what's going on. But there comes a point in the research where you want to stop, bring it all together, and that happens later in the process that we go through in our program. And you want to bring it all together so that you can have a look at it in more detail and come to some conclusions or some findings about what's taken place and where you've got to, what outcome you've achieved in achieving the answers to the questions you might have posed at the beginning. So this is an ongoing process. It's a spiral process. And I think on the next slide, there's a model of Chemison McTaggart's original representation of this process. And as you can see, it's not a linear, straightforward kind of one step, next step, and then on to the next step. It's actually quite dynamic and spiraling, and it takes you backwards and forwards as you go through the process of the research, and it then can start again when you come to a point where you might find you need to go in a different direction, or there's more you can do to investigate it. So it's not a fixed kind of linear model, and there's no fixed number of cycles that you might go through either. It really depends on the area that you want to look at and the kinds of questions that you've got in mind and the actions that you want to take. But we discuss this in quite a lot of detail during the workshops. This is just to give you a very brief overview of the nature of action research on the processes. And we use this model because it's relatively straightforward. It's not too complex or complicated. And it also reflects the sort of practical steps in the process, which are a bit more concrete and not too abstract. So let's go on and have a look at what action research typically doesn't do. And I've already alluded to some more traditional approaches to action research. So we're not really out here to prove or disprove an experimental hypothesis. We're not conducting experimental scientific research in that sense that it's sometimes used in research projects. We're not really interested in control and experimental groups because we can't necessarily set up another control group in relation to the class that we're teaching. It's not often possible to do that. And again, we discuss this in some detail in the workshops. So we're not really interested in control experimental type of research. And we're not going to emphasize pre and post-test methods. So this isn't just looking at testing students before and then testing them afterwards, although you may want to use test scores to show what happens as a result of what you did. But we're not putting an emphasis on this kind of pre-testing, post-testing methodology. And then also, when not generally in action research, people don't use inferential statistical analysis. And by that, I mean the kind of statistical analysis which is often used in experimental research, which follow quite sophisticated statistical processes where you need to know the methodologies and the ways of approaching that statistical analysis in order to do it rigorously. We might be using descriptive statistics, so you could be looking at averages or numbers of students who do this or do that and so on. But that's really a different kind of statistical analysis, which can be useful in action research. Then action research can't produce generalizable findings. That's a question I sometimes get asked. You know, it's only in one little location. What difference does it make? But that is not the purpose of action research. The purpose is discovery and enhancement and improvement, and also the kind of illustrations that you can show through your research for other teachers who may be grappling with similar issues and trying to work out new ways of approaching them. I think, yes, summing up, really, I think what I would say is we're really on a journey of exploration with action research. It's not an experimental scientific tradition. It's an exploratory process. And the very interesting things I've found for many of the teachers I've worked with in ELICOS over the years is that they're astounded at where they get to by the end of the research compared with the starting point of the journey, because it's an exploration. It's like you're an explorer in a new country where you're really trying to find out the way through and the route that suits you and your students best for the kind of research you want to do. So just to run through the criteria that we use for the proposals or the expressions of interest for the ELICOS program, Sophie has very helpfully talked about the topic and the theme for next year. And we do have a theme each year because we found that that provides focus and direction for some of the hot topics that are coming up in ELICOS. And people appreciate the fact that they're sort of researching in the same area. Therefore, it really enhances the discussion amongst the group to have a common core of ideas that you're all pursuing. So as we said, it's formative feedback and assessment using generative AI to enhance personalized feedback on language and develop essential life competencies. We've actually found that there's quite a lot of work now that ELICOS teachers have done looking at personalized feedback, both before using generative AI and after using it. And that's been incredibly helpful and useful. But Gen AI brings a new issue into the equation. So we're quite interested in looking at that and taking it much further. We had some fabulous projects this year, which did bring in the idea of personalized feedback. But I think pursuing it even further is really valuable. And also, we're doing more than just providing feedback as ELICOS teachers for language learning. Often we're really trying to develop those life skill competencies that will take our students beyond the classroom and into the kind of study that they want to do, the kind of goals they want to achieve longer term with the use of English language and the skills that they develop as a result of being in our programs. So this proposal or the proposal that you put in needs to be relevant to that theme in some way, as Sophie mentioned earlier. Then also we try to look for a new angle and innovation, not in the sense of some, wow, it's got to be completely different and completely new, but something which should be new or interesting to ELICOS in generally, a new way or a new angle on looking at things and trying it out so that it's a bit fresh and a bit new and can be taken up maybe by other teachers. And several of the projects this year certainly brought out some new ideas, some quite, inventive sort of ways of doing things, which were very, very exciting. And also the EOI needs to be clear and clearly articulated and developed. So it should be written well. Don't aim for overly academic kind of language. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for something which is clearly explained. The steps that you want to take are quite clearly stated at this stage. And also it should be small scale. We're not interested in PhD here. It's not PhD level, it's small scale. It's something that you could feasibly manage within the 10 months or so period that you will be doing the research. So don't go for broke, don't overdo it, make it manageable and make it something that would be useful and interesting to yourself and to other people, and state that idea clearly. And we're also looking for how would your ideas appeal to other people? That might be teachers in your centre, it might be people who are developing the curriculum within your centre. Can your ideas possibly apply to other classes and other learners, and to curriculum development if that's ongoing in the centre, and also to the ELICOS sector more broadly, you know, that it's focused on what is beneficial and helpful for ELICOS students. So there should be a relevance to your classroom and showing how it'll make a difference, but also possibly some statements about how you might be able to use it in your centre, or it provides a broader example for ELICOS. And those are the things that we look for in the proposals. So as I say, try and make it sort of clear, straightforward, and not complicated academic language. We're not looking for that. We're looking for a clear statement of what it is you think you might do as part of the research. I think we've got an example here that we can briefly show you from one of the previous year's work. Sophie's just bringing it up. Okay, can make it a little larger, Sophie, that would be great. So this is it possible to make it slightly larger?
Seems to be as big as it's going to go.
Oh, okay, that's fine. So again, this is one on Gen AI, which we were looking at some detail this year for the first time because it was such a new area. So the research theme here was enhancing or transforming learning-oriented assessment. That was the theme. And the people who put in this EOI, first of all, they explained the project background. So they gave a little bit of information about what was happening in their centre with their students, the feasibility of integrating AI and looking at it in a different way. So giving us a little bit of background like that is really helpful. It may be that you include there perhaps the reasons why the area or the topic is of real interest to you, or how it's affecting the students in your centre, or the issues that may have arisen that are perhaps not being as addressed as fully as everybody would like to see, so that you're looking for a way to explore that and take it further. And then the research focus, in this case, these researchers decided that they would put in their questions. Now, that is really helpful because it seeks to really focus what it is you're trying to do. However, we've found that these research questions are only temporary, and often during the workshops people will change their mind about what questions they want to ask, and in fact rewrite the questions or perhaps tweak them quite a bit so that they're going in a different direction. And that's the result of discussion that often happens at the first workshop, which give people new ideas. The other participants are helping them to bounce off new ideas, or to share something that they hadn't thought about, or to give it a new angle or perspective. So, the initial question is really just a tentative one that you want to put up for consideration. And then they've got a statement there. Sorry, Sophie, if you can go back down again. Yeah, thank you. So they've got a statement there saying they're going to investigate the potential and the limitations of using GAI and look at the kind of learner training that's needed. And then they've got some aims in there, what they hope that they will achieve from the program, and what they hope to get out of it for themselves and for their students. You can read these later as well, because the link will be there for you to go over, but I'll just give a general description here. And then the methods. So what they've said there is more or less what they think they will do when they manage the research, who's going to teach what their roles are in the project as a whole, and then what kind of data they might collect, how they're going to put their plan into action, and the kind of things that they'll be looking to bring into the project as data to provide some evidence. You can see that statement in the last paragraph. Their data will be collected from samples, so they've got an idea of what they would like to do to provide that data for their own thinking and then for the development of their project. And then later after that, they've got some references. It's not absolutely essential to put in references, but we found that ELICOS teachers on the whole are a very well-educated bunch of teachers, and often they've already read some interesting articles, or they've been influenced by work that they've heard about in the master's course or other studies that they may be doing. So there's no objection if you want to put in references of the kind that you feel will support the expression of interest, and is can be useful if you've already got a background in some reading. We don't actually require you to do particular reading for this course. It's not a university course. It's a professional development course for learning more about action research. So we won't be asking you to read lots and lots of articles that we supply. What we can do is recommend particular articles that may be valuable for your particular research. For example, in this year's program, there were two researchers working together who are extremely interested in pronunciation and use of Gen AI. And they asked me for particular references that they could go to. And then they found that helpful, and they used those to inform their research. But we don't ask for a literature review. It's not part of the way the report is written up, but you may want to integrate some literature into the way you think about the research that you're doing, or even go back to the literature at the end to find some other research that's been done which supports what you've been doing along the way. So this is not a traditional sort of university course. It's work in progress, really, to explore the areas that you want to go along for the duration of the project. Okay, I might stop at that point, Sophie, and we'll go on to Liz Stoyanova, who I'm very pleased to say Liz was included in the program this year, and she and her partner Rima did some fantastic research. I think you can see them in that photo. Yeah, Rima's in the front and Liz is standing just behind her. So they're both there. This was at the presentation at this year's English Australia conference. So over to you, Liz.
Thank you very much, Anne. Well, I'm delighted to be here today, and I'm delighted to have been part of the action research team this year. And I use the word team quite deliberately. From the moment we started the journey, Rima, my colleague Rima, and I, it never felt like we were alone. We have been completely supported, and I cannot emphasize enough how exhilarating it's been, and how much we've learned from that whole process. So I will be honest, it's a huge commitment. It is really demanding in many ways. As Anne already explained, it's not a linear process. So we started off with one question, which was about AI and feedback on writing. And of course, we had to tweak that quite a few times. We had quite a few iterations, and as we did the research, then of course we went back and thought, now that's the most interesting part. Oh, no, we might change this around a little bit. So it's definitely very cyclical. But when you see that something's being illuminated, it's really exciting. And at the end of it, you look back and you think, it's all so clear now. It doesn't always feel like that when you're in the middle of it. You do have to feel your way along at times. But as I said, you feel so supported. We felt very supported by Sophie, by Anne, and by the other action researchers, because we bounced ideas off each other. We were supported by the three workshops. And the whole scaffolding, the whole design of the program is very, very thoughtfully done, so that you start off, you're a little bit out of your comfort zone, but then everything's explained to you, and then you push yourself further and you go to the next stage, you're supported again. We also had a WhatsApp group, which was really helpful. So yes, it is demanding, but also extremely rewarding. And in particular, I'd like to say that I never felt intimidated at all, because I always felt that I had somebody to go to. I could ask questions, and it was a wonderful opportunity for professional development. We learned so much. I think we learned about our own practice. Of course, we learned about pedagogy. We learned about new possibilities. It really gets you to imagine. And I think that, we know about theory, we know about research, but there's always a gap between the theory and the practice in the classroom. And I think this is an exciting way to really bridge that gap. The other highlight for me was going to the English Australia conference, of course, and presenting. I had never presented at a conference before, and I would have felt very daunted by it. But because we were presenting together with my partner Rima, but also as a whole action research group, it was a wonderful way to enter that arena for the first time. And the other thing, of course, is I've never published a journal article before, and this is also a really wonderful way to do that for the first time. So my advice is to really give it your best shot. And yes, it will be demanding. You do need to be committed to it, but it has just so many rewards. Thank you. I'll hand back to you now, Sophie.
Yeah, thanks so much, Liz. It's always so rich when we actually hear from the participants about the program. So thank you. Thanks for that really great kind of summary of your experience of the program this year. We are going to open up for Q&A now. So if you have any questions, please write them in the chat. And the question can be for me, for Anne, or for Liz. You can stipulate who you would like to answer the question, or you don't have to do that either. But yes, please pop your questions into the chat now. Can't see any questions yet, but we'll wait another minute. Okay, so Richard Holland is asking if we have the workshops, the dates for the workshops. Yes, we do. So I have popped the URL for all of the information about the Action Research Program into this chat. So it was further up. And if you go to that web page, the exact dates for each of the workshops is listed there. Actually, I think it's, only the first two workshops dates are listed. So the workshops in March and in June, and the exact dates are on the website. The third workshop isn't listed, and that's because we usually negotiate that date with the research participants during the workshops 1 and 2. We negotiate the date for the third workshop. We also haven't published the date for the English Australia Conference in September yet, and that's because we haven't confirmed that date. So we'll be releasing the conference date in the next couple of weeks. So we'll do that via email and on our social media. So I'll also pop the date on the Action Research webpage. So you can check in again in a couple of weeks to get the date for the English Australia Conference in 2025.
Sophie, perhaps we can mention that the third workshop is usually in August.
Usually in August, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's correct. All right, so there's one other question, which I think I will address to you, Anne. The question is AI being embraced in academia?
Well, I think it's a complicated area. I would say that people are being led to embrace it because it's now part of life, life in academia. And so there's more research being done on different aspects of AI and how it can be used beneficially in academia and not abused, I suppose you could say, through taking over students' writing and so on. I think it's early days, but there are a whole lot of issues that are being raised around the use of AI and how universities can manage it. And definitely a lot of research is being done. If you're interested in looking at some of the broader issues, there was a very, very interesting presentation by Professor Mark Pegram from the University of Western Australia, which was presented at the conference this year. And I think it might still be available, Sophie, on the website.
Yes, so the slides are available on the English Australia website under the 2024 conference.
Yeah. Mark is an expert on technology and has looked at a lot of issues in AI. So if you want to explore that further, I can really recommend having a look at Mark's slides and the points that he makes, because they're very wide-ranging and are going to be more and more important for academic researchers to look at in the future. Thank you for the question. It's a big one, but an important one.
Okay, I think that's all of the questions. Again, all of the links that we included today, the models, everything that we talked about is on our website. There are also some examples of potential areas that align to this year's theme, research areas. They're only examples, but it might be interesting for you to read them just to kind of get an idea of the types of projects that could be possible. But again, they're examples and they're not prescriptive at all. I'll just check once more for questions. No, I think that's it. All right. Well, thanks again, Anne and Liz, for joining me today. And thank you to everybody for coming. I'm going to pop my email into the chat now. If you do have any other questions, don't hesitate to send me an email. I can even jump on a phone call and have a chat with you if you would like to do that. And yeah, very, very happy to answer any questions about the program. All right, thanks everybody.